of the New Testament. The struggle against these people is a long one. They have not by any means conquered terrorism in Saudi Arabia, let alone the Iranian problem, the threat that will not come directly from Iran to Saudi Arabia, but the threat that could come if the Israelis are foolish enough to do something against Iran and then to have Iran retaliate against the Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia. So, in the case of Kurdistan, the threat is partly the current situation that sees areas outside of the three core provinces of the Kurdish region as constituted officially and formally under the Iraqi constitution. Part of these areas is coveted by certain people in Kurdistan. These are close to the cities of Mosul and Kirkuk, and there's a lot of oil there. And this could be a cause of instability. I was not too worried about this a few months ago. I'm a little bit more worried now. I'm not losing any sleep, but I'm more worried now than I was before because of the results of the Iraqi elections, which seem to be very indecisive and unclear. A decisive result in the elections that took place in Iraq a few days ago would probably mean more peace and quiet in Kurdistan. The way the results are now on a kind of knife edge means that there is room for instability in Kurdistan. I hope I'm wrong. Lebanon is instability city. Instability, the Lebanese are specialists in a few minutes after the bomb going off. They go out to the nightclubs and they stay up till morning and they have a good time. This is not going to lead to 8% growth, however. This is just going to keep the economy ticking over until things quiet down and they can go back to high growth. By the way, the prediction for growth in Lebanon this year is around 6%. Could be a lot higher if things remain very calm. Finally, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, unlike its Gulf neighbors, is a big place. So, heaven forbid that these things should happen, and I'm only giving them as an example. If a bomb goes off in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, the whole place would shut down. Bomb goes off in Saudi Arabia, it's a big place. If it goes off in the eastern province, you have the central and western provinces where nothing is happening, or even to the point where if Iran does something in the eastern province, which is on the Arabian Gulf, across the water from Iran, maybe life will continue as normal in the central or western provinces. But it won't be the normal that we want, the normal with an economy that is diversifying very heavily. So, the final point I want to make, how do I personally feel about all this? Could go either way. If in an imaginary world I come back here before the end of the year and I'm giving a follow-up talk to this one, and there was a major war in the Gulf, there were implications, ramifications, aftershocks of this war in Lebanon because of Hezbollah in Israel, and there were indirectly mixed up with all this serious disputes between the central government in Baghdad and the regional government in Erbil over Kirkuk and Mosul and the border areas, then my lecture would be the 49% of the glass that is, or rather the 51% of the glass that is definitely empty, and how the Middle East is suffering tremendously. And then I might say something like, well, Jordan is doing better. And instead of talking about Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, and Kurdistan as the success stories, I would talk about Jordan and Egypt and other countries, because this threat is strategic. And the strategic factor, as I said, is typically it's not measurable. You can't measure it easily. And typically it happens behind closed doors, like the meeting that took place yesterday between Bibi and President Obama. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I've gone on beyond my time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Riad. It's wonderful to hear about these points of light, but always depressing to hear that they're shadowed by potential war and violence. We'll take questions, but if I may, if you'd like to come stand here.
The water problem in the Middle East.
That was my question.
Is that Kurdish water? Well, I'll start while you're drinking your water. I'll open the Q&A. A lot of interesting information here. I'd like a few more details about Saudi Arabia. You said that for the first time Saudi Arabia is developing a real economy outside of the oil industry. Elaborate on that. Where are they, what is being developed outside of the oil industry?
Okay. The oil industry forms the base for much of this development, which is built on petrochemicals. They're now manufacturing a wide range of products, or starting to manufacture a wide range of products based on plastics and related industries. There is a very nice article by Tim Niblock. It's a chapter in a book called The Arab State and Neoliberal Globalization. It was published last year. And it's entitled, this chapter, Globalization and the Saudi Economy, Gains and Losses. You will find those details there. For what it's worth, apart from petrochemicals and things based on petrochemicals, the Saudis used to have an interest in agriculture, no more, so that's not where the growth is coming from. But there is now a gleam in the eye of the Saudis regarding tourism. Now this, remember what I said a few minutes ago, when the tourist doesn't get the beer, that's it. Shut down the tourism industry. Saudi Arabia is an exception, because the tourist in Saudi Arabia knows that there ain't no beer. It's not, maybe there is, no, there isn't. And he knew that before he showed up in Saudi Arabia. The Saudis are now trying to build something around their Hajj. The Hajj is actually a kind of backhanded tourism. It's religious tourism. The Iraqis, by the way, have also a very strong religious tourism in the Karbala and Najaf areas for the Shiites, typically of Iran, but also other parts of the world. And I made an argument last year, I was doing some work for the Saudi Ministry of Planning, that Saudi Arabia could brand itself, Saudi brands, in two ways, two places where it would be accepted by the broad spectrum of society there, because there are liberalizers and there are strong conservatives, neither of whom are violent or unreasonable. They're all within the mainstream. And those sectors are food and tourism. The Saudis have a pretty good food sector because there ain't nothing else to do in Saudi Arabia. You want to go out in the evening, you cannot go to the opera, to the cinema, to the theater. They literally don't exist. So you eat. And the Saudis can afford to have good food. They can afford to bring in good chefs. They have been developing their manufacturing food sector in a very interesting way. I said a few minutes ago that this wasn't agriculture. They're importing the raw materials and processing them. And as a kind of adjunct to this, they have an excellent system of standards and specifications, including their equivalent of the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, where they actually produce very nice food. So with a little bit of flair and branding, they could, Saudi Arabia comes across as the food capital, as the food center. It's doable. This would be linked up somehow to the tourism. Today, the so-called tourists are guys guys and gals who are coming to do the pilgrimage in Mecca. This could be massaged into something slightly different. You could have different kinds of tourism. There are some very interesting archaeological sites in Saudi Arabia. The Saudis don't like to talk about them because this has to do with paganism, and a lot of these sites are either Christian or they're pre-Christian. Some of them are even Jewish, and there's a big nervousness in Saudi Arabia.